what's up YouTube? Mike at Viking Motorworks. Well, today's project is going to be AC compressor replacement and diagnosis on the C3 LS swap 1982. And so the situation as it is I was out on a drive and the AC stopped working. A minute later, started working again. So, you know, the AC stops working, you could be low on charge, but if it starts working again, chances are you're not low on charge, unless you're just low enough to trip the low side while it's running, and then it switches on and off, etc. It'll turn on. The compressor continues to try to engage, but the compressor won't spin. Now, this is a Sanden SD508 compressor. Aftermarket, but, you know, not total junk. I did replace the rear head to put different fittings on it so I could get my AC lines on correctly, but other than that, it's charged, been working fine for months. What I noticed immediately was that when I turn the AC on, I can hear the compressor click. Of course, all the relays trip and the computer's controlling it appropriately, but the compressor is not able to, the compressor clutch isn't able to drive the compressor. So one of two things has happened. Either the compressor has locked up inside, or the clutch is just smoked, which is pretty common as well, but not really that common on these compressors. So I put a wrench on the nut on the end of the shaft, and you can barely turn the compressor internals. It's hard to tell at this point whether it's just because of the charge and the amount of compression inside the compressor, or because the internals are letting go. So I disconnected the compressor. I don't want it to engage, because if it is grenading inside mechanically, it's going to dump a bunch of metal in the system, which I'm going to have to flush out, and I'm prepared to do that if necessary. But at this point, I don't know whether it's just a bad clutch or a bad compressor, and the compressor being locked up has smoked the clutch. Either way, I'm going to replace this compressor, because, you know, a new clutch is going to be 30-40 bucks, and an hour and a half of labor, and then you got to set the air gap on the compressor clutch. And honestly, you know, these compressors, replacement compressors, aren't terribly expensive. And what I'm going to do is upgrade to a 7 HD15, which is a higher displacement. It's a 7-piston compressor instead of a 5, so it's more efficient, a little less drag while you're driving. Has the same clutch, the same physical dimensions. The only difference is this end head is a little deeper, but this did already come with the correct ends on it. And you can tell that it's a 7 because of the 7-bolt rear head. And obviously, if you would place a bolt here, it would be 7 bolts, the one between each head in a circular fashion, whereas the 5 series has 5 bolts around. So what we're going to do is let's hook up gauges and see how much charge is left in it. And we're going to have to get a baseline. A little bit of pressure under that cap. I wonder if that Schrader valve's leaking. Both of these have a little bit of pressure. Get on there, you. Alright, so that's on. Make sure my valves are turned off. Now we'll take a look at the baseline. Now, of course, this is a full custom system, so I don't have a set amount of weight in Freon to be installed. What you can do is, this is originally an R12 car, so you can look at the original spec'd out weight in Freon, and converting it to 134, you'd want to multiply that by 0.8, because it'll take a little less 134. And what I'm doing right now is just looking to see what the, let me grab my spectacles. What I'm doing right now is just looking to see what the baseline pressure reading is at this temperature and humidity. And as you can see, we're looking at about 78. And low side's a little more detailed, the range is shorter. So let's say about 75, 78 PSI. Right now, we'll take a look and I'll post up what the temperature and humidity. I know the humidity is like 88. I think the temperature is in the high 70s here in this beautiful Florida morning. So obviously it still has enough of a full charge, enough of a charge. And I'm going to go ahead and recover the Freon out of it. I mean, I know the compressor's not engaging, so there's no sense in running it and checking pressure readings because the compressor can't engage. So I'm going to go ahead and evacuate this out. And we'll disconnect the lines. One thing I'm going to want to do, and we'll take a look inside this compressor too, but one thing I'm absolutely going to want to do, if I have any indication that this compressor has let go mechanically, is I'm going to want to pull the orifice tube out, which is down here in this straight section underneath this nut. And it's set in there with an O-ring and seals, and that's got a screen built on it. So, you know, what would happen if the compressor let go mechanically, the output of the compressor is going to carry metal particles with it. It's going to run that through the output up to the condenser, and so those will circulate through the condenser and they'll pump out with the Freon carried the whole way, and then they'll get trapped by the screen in the orifice tube. So I'm going to, regardless of what I do, I'm going to open this connection and pull the orifice tube out and inspect the screen, and that really is going to be my primary indicator of whether the compressor has started to let go inside or not. And then what I'll have to do then is clean the screen out or replace it, and then I'll have to flush out this high side section between the compressor, the condenser, and then the return line going over to the orifice tube. This hard aluminum line you can see running. Well, basically the high side line here, the smaller diameter should be a 8AN, I think, or number 8 refrigerant line, runs up to the condenser, circulates, and then comes back out through that hard line and runs out and would stop at the orifice tube. So the orifice tube and screen would catch anything. So that'll be a big indicator for me. Is I'll pull that. Once I get the system evacuated, I'm going to pop that nut and pull the orifice tube out, and we'll see what we'll see if there's any junk stuck in the screen, and that'll tell me right off the bat whether this compressor has let go inside or not. And if it hasn't let go inside, I might not bother pulling it apart, but if it is, I'm going to want to see what went wrong. But I'll let me get the sucker evacuated, and I'll be right back.
How dare you!
All right, so let's get this orifice tube connection out. Now, of course, this is going to be 2 7/8, and I only have a single 7/8 wrench, so I'm going to use an adjustable on this lower nut, see if I can tuck it out of the way. Tiniest bit of residual pressure left in the system. And let that bleed out. Grab a pair of needle nose. I'm going to need those to get the orifice tube up and out anyway. To double check that O-ring also, see if I need to replace it. It's a fresh O-ring. It's only a couple of months old, but so the orifice tube is right here. There's actually a dimple on the line that keeps it from dropping in too far. When you pull this nut off, it'll be sticking up in the tube. I can get it to turn a little bit. There we go. You don't want to twist it off and break it. So, all right, so let's see here.
That's actually pretty good. Yeah, a little bit of junk in there. Yep, a little bit, but not much. Not what I would expect from a blown up compressor inside. A little bit of debris at the very bottom. A little bit of fuzz. That's from the inside of the compressor, most likely. Maybe a little bit of shavings from the inside of the brand new condenser. And, you know, this whole system essentially is new. New condenser, new lines and hoses, new compressor. So a little bit of fuzz isn't unheard of. And that's the job of the screen, is to catch any of this junk. I see a couple little flakes, but honestly, this isn't bad. I don't think I need to replace this. I'm going to blow it out. Make sure the orifice is clear. But the screen has barely anything in it. I found a little flake down the bottom, down towards the O-ring that actually had pushed in, fell down past the screen. But, you know, again, brand new compressor, brand new condenser, brand new lines. There's going to be some stuff in there. And I think that's entirely normal. Or the compressor was just starting to lock up, so we lost a little bit of metal out of it, but it didn't totally grenade. I've seen some of these come apart where they just pour metal into the system, and you end up having to replace the condenser as well. I was expecting this to be caked up like silver paint, you know, like tons of glitter, and I'm happy to find out it's not too bad. So I don't know. I even want to bother. I don't know if I'll even bother flushing this. I mean, there's nothing in the condenser. There's no area in the condenser. It's all round tube inside where anything should accumulate. The flow through it is high enough that any flakes that get in there should be pushed right out the other side until you get to the point where they're big chunks. And I'm not seeing anything here that indicates I have a bigger problem than just this, a little bit of dust. I'm going to let this roll. Let me blow this out with some brake clean before I reinstall it. And with the O-rings too, as you pull it up out of the tube, you're scraping the inside of that tube down too. So I'm not worried about there being any junk down in the tube where the orifice was, because the O-rings will sweep that as it comes out. And yeah, we got red tip up. They even put a little hook on the end so you can grab it with a pick or a screwdriver or whatever and give it a yank. But I just grabbed a needle nose on there. Drop it back in the tube, slide it down, and it's home. Make sure the O-ring is still perfect, and it is. There's nothing. Like I said, this is brand new. This is only, I don't know, 6 months old. The line seated back in. Get out of there, you. Line fittings are funny sometimes. I probably could have put a drop of oil on the thread. Might have been a better idea. And you little devil. I'm going to back this off and put a little oil on the threads. It's hanging up. Now the aluminum's galling. It's pretty soft. Both of these fittings are aluminum. It's pretty soft stuff. It's got to be just stiff enough that I need to use a wrench, but yep. Seems like the flare on the tube that the orifice tube sits in is actually pretty big, and it's hanging on the threads inside the nut on the line. That's where the problem is coming from. I can actually thread the line down over that flare, like it's feeding up through the threads. Pretty odd. Once it gets to the back behind the threads, it's going to be open back there, and it'll just spin free like it is now. I'm just going to run the nut up to it. I think that's where the problem lies, is this outer nut on the top on the hard line was actually threading over the end of the flare and the nut on the line at the same time, and that's where it was binding. So I've got this outer nut threaded all the way down over the hard line flare, over the orifice tube line flare. Now I'm just drawing the nut from the orifice tube line up into it. Yeah, that's it. It's O-ring sealed, so as long as it's tight enough to keep the O-ring compressed, you're fine. Pretty Mickey Mouse. Come on, you. Alright, so that's good and tight. And I can't get any rotation on the nut, which is fine. The high side line coming out, I think, is also a 7/8. These are also O-ring sealed. Yeah, little poof as I took it off. And then the larger nut, the low side nut coming in, I think it's 1 1/16. Again, the O-rings are perfect. They're brand new. Tuck these guys out of the way. Oh, what do we got? Tensioner on the serpentine belt. Nine sixteenths. More hard feed from the compressor to the relay, and I've got this going straight on the relay. And then 6 bolts or 5 bolts to hold the compressor on. You should hold it 9/16. Make that 4 bolts on the compressor. No, I'm kidding. Luckily, if you work on cars or anything else for any length of time, you will recognize the holy goodness of hearing that nut actually hit the ground under the car. Which is a thing of beauty. That means it did not disappear into Never Never Land. Is that not a... Is that bolt of 13 really? 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 Yup. Trying to... just dropped another nut down on the frame. I can see it though. We're okay. We should get an extension to help me clear the clutch over here. We should be out. Yeah. Everything was 13. A couple of those bolts have necked down heads, smaller heads for clearance. That's why I was running into problems. Need to get a little stubby extension just to get the wrench away from the clutch so I can get a swing on it. Here's a nut fill on the frame. Grab my magnet, the one that fell on the floor. Faster. One, two, three. 1, 2, 3. And you should be out. Oh yeah, I forgot the joys of these billet aftermarket brackets. I'm gonna have to loosen this. I'm gonna have to loosen this AC bracket setup to spread the ears enough to get it out because of the bosses. This front head actually has these raised bosses around the bolt holes, and they tend to. There's one on the other side here. There's a bolt down there. It's interfering with the bracket. I don't think. Yeah, I recall when I put this in, I had to loosen this bracket up to allow it to flex around. So. Oh. 13s, 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 and then maybe a 15. Not even a 15. What are you? What are you? Could that actually be an SAE bolt, a 5/8? Get out of here. Get out of town. It is amazing. All right, let these guys loose enough. And the tensioner, now I need to just crack these two loose up front, and that'll let this bracket spread enough. It's actually spreading a little bit already. Can you sneak it out of there? Quite enough yet. Well, I have a 13 over here. I do not. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get this tensioner out of here. Little spacer's jammed in there. Wonder how much tweak I can get on that. Because really, I just got to snake that compressor ear out of there. And capture that spacer. Yeah. If it wasn't for that little 5/16 nut, bolt head sticking out of the front of the compressor. There it goes. It was these guys right here. The darn bracket drops into this recess, but you can't get it over that hump. And then, of course, it hits the nut, so I had to come out even further. But all right, so here's our new compressor. Now, these are shipped with oil in it from the factory to keep away corrosion and everything else. You don't want to leave that oil in there. So the first thing we need to do is drain that out. Yay! So this is a drain fill plug on the top of the compressor. Usually has a sealing washer on the bottom side of it. Yep, oh, it's actually an O-ring seal. Okay, good. So it definitely does not have to be that tight. And that really just encloses the crankcase. I'm going to go ahead and loosen up, take these caps off. Cover up the inlet and the outlet ports. Sometimes you'll find pressure in here. It's funny, depending on where the compressor was sealed, what altitude, and then shipped to you what altitude you're at, you might have some residual pressure in there. You really shouldn't. Technically, there's no reason to have any pressure in it, but we're going to see if we can dump this guy out. Oh, yeah. Keep my harness out of the way. You see there's a good deal of oil in there. Good bit. Harness is not cooperating. Get out of here, you. And it's not a bad idea to rotate the compressor. Make sure there isn't any oil hung up in the works. You can see we're getting a good deal out. There's a few ounces in there. This is not operational oil. You don't want to run this through your system. We're going to drain this all out, and then we'll refill it. And the proper amount should be labeled on the side of the compressor. I'm just going to turn this guy around inside. Make sure there aren't any spots that could catch oil and hanging out up there. I mean, it doesn't have to be sterile inside, but you want to get the vast majority of it out. You know, we're going to put in probably 6 or 8 ounces of fresh oil, so it'll more than make up for some extra, a little bit of shipping oil. I mean, this is very close to the correct weight, I'm assuming. It would make sense to me. I don't know why they would put a different weight oil in there, but you want to make sure you have the correct amount in there. So we're going to drain this out and then refill it to the proper amount. See if we're getting anything out of the ports. Yeah, a bit. yeah. And I'm just tipping it back and forth because the case is, the case is long and that drain hole is right in the middle of it. So I want to make sure I'm flushing it. Anything that's hanging out in the bottom of the case is making its way to the drain hole. So yeah, I mean, I don't know why they would put a different weight oil in there than what it calls for, but I'm not going to take the chance. I want to know it has the correct amount of the correct oil in there. And also whenever I add oil to a system, whether I'm adding oil or in this case, putting the first fill in, this is getting slick now. It's getting slippery. Whenever I put the add oil to the system or put fresh oil in this case, I always use UV dye loaded oil. That way it's in there already. If I have a leak at some point in the future, it's easier to identify. You don't have to discharge it and add UV dye. Those days are long behind us. Now you can buy any of the recommended standard grade AC refrigerant oils. You can buy those with UV dye already added to it. So that's the only stuff I use. All right, I think we're good. Let me clean up this mess. We'll get it loaded up. We'll get it loaded up with oil and get ready to put the sucker in there. Yeah. Nasty. You nasty, baby. I'm not going to bother cleaning this compressor down too much right now because I've got to add oil to it. And if I know me, I'm bound to spill some. But this stuff, like any other oil, would get everywhere. I'm just trying to keep it to a minimum. Label on the side of the compressor, 160 milliliters of oil. It's a 7H15. And this is a 155 cc compressor, which is actually a larger displacement compressor than the one I took out. So it should have a better cooling capacity. Now I'm not running a rear air or anything where I need high capacity, but better to have too much and have it not struggling. And it calls for PAG 100 with 134 and of course with UV dye. So now I've just got to measure out 160 milliliters and add it to it. All right, so my little mixer measuring cup. You can see it in the light. 150 cc's, which is the same as milliliter. We'll go a skosh above that. Ooh, pretty color. That's 150. Next lineup is 200. So 175 is between that. And if I split that difference, you get me to 162. Looks good to me. Now the tricky part, dumping this in without pouring it all over my workbench and the side of the compressor. I would suspect this is going to take a good deal of patience. Easy. One thing I will advise you, when you're filling a compressor up, especially with this much oil, you are filling that compressor body up with oil. There's a ton of oil in here. Because they know a lot of it's going to get circulated through the rest of the system. The compressor crankcase is fed by the refrigerant oil. So the oil that I'm filling a crankcase with right now will actually blow out and into the system. So the crankcase right now is full of several ounces of oil. And if you were to put this on the car, hook the belt up, start it up, and crank it, a good chance you'd do some damage because you're not pumping vapor and gas refrigerant. You're pumping liquid oil. And so you'll want to get in there. Once this is installed back in the car and the lines are reconnected, I'm going to hand crank this compressor a few times and make sure that it isn't hydrolocking. See if there's a torque spec on this nut bolt. I don't think there is, and honestly, it's got an O-ring seal, so it's just got to be tight enough to compress the O-ring, but not gorilla tight. These are. This is the plug is probably zinc, but the case is aluminum. And it's a fairly fine thread. Once that O-ring compresses even the slightest bit, it's going to seal. So obviously that's tight. Yeah. Just for ha-has, where'd the destructions go? As I throw them on the ground. I threw it on the ground. See if they give a torque spec for that guy. Just some cleaning, blah, blah, blah. Drain oil. Yeah. Gas load. Services. Nothing. No appendix with torque specs in it. No. Marketing materials, advertisements. Great, thanks. Awesome. Like I said, torque spec isn't critical. It's O-ring sealed, so. We're ready to go back on the car. All right, so away we go. I apologize for that buzzing noise in the background. Apparently one of my neighbors decided now was the best time to run some cheesy little 110 pressure washer and clean his driveway off, but we can't control the rest of the world, can we? Much as we'd like to. I'm going to pretend I don't hear it, and then I'll try and see if I can't take that out in post. Oh, you are stubborn, aren't you? Yes, you are. All right, I'm going to go back and loosen up that bracket a little more because I'm torquing the hell out of it, and I don't want to bend it. It's just built, just 1/4 inch aluminum. Oh yeah, I had that over there already. No, no. That one's actually going to be an SAE bolt also. All right. Wait a second. Wait just a minute. No, I'm a goofball. I grabbed the wrong metric before. We in? All right, we're in. Well, I'll tell you what, here's an unexpected surprise. Oh, good job. Pulley diameter on the new one is larger than the pulley on the old one. I'm going to have to get creative with the hardware. Unless I want the hardware running into the pulley face, the backside of the pulley. I may have to go out and fetch some shallow nuts. They are right just about on there. I'd like to keep using these flange nuts, but I may have to grind some down. They're not prevailing torque or nylox or anything, so I'm not overly concerned about losing clamping force, but I may have to fetch some shallower nuts or machine these down. Go without a flange if I can find something a little shallower, because there just isn't that much clearance between the face of the bracket and the backside of the pulley. I'll tell you what, let's get one on there. Up to the pulley. Let's see if we have any interference issues. Dumb. How do they do the 9/16? Here's the other shorty. Yeah, these ones on the bottom front ones are a treat, let me tell you. The threads from the bolt aren't really an issue because they're so much narrower than the faces of the nut. Nope. I'm gonna have to get a wobble extension or something to sneak around the side so I can run that up. Let's see if we got an issue here. Oh, it's clearing the compressor pulley. Oh yeah, you know what? Once the nuts run down, it's quite a bit more clearance than I expected. I'm just gonna need to get probably a wobble extension. Get in on that bottom bolt. I can run that down. Our 13 mil swivel. Get on there, you. There we go. Yeah, we're good. Compressor pulley, no revvy. I'm gonna make sure that bottom bolt is tight enough. I couldn't give much swing with that ratchet to give it a last bit of torque. So I'm actually bolting it straight onto the front bracket, and then I'll push the compressor back until it meets the rear bracket, and we'll be golden. Be careful too, I don't put any pressure on this outlet from the, or inlet from the surge tank, from the reservoir. Oh yeah, I guess that was a little tighter than I thought it was. All right. And I've still got the flange nuts in there, and nuts and bolts, which grab really well. Yeah, so that's fine. There's actually probably 100 thou clearance. I didn't expect there to be that much. Just it didn't eyeball up to be that much clearance initially. The large diameter pulley is actually a good thing because it'll slow down the compressor speed a little bit, which I thought might have been an issue when I was thinking maybe it had grenaded. Because those those SD508s are rated for like 6,000 RPM, and this motor regularly spins. I hope this light wasn't blocking your view the whole time. This motor regularly spins to well over 6,000 RPM. Not all day long, but you know, eventually that's going to beat the compressor up. All right, now let's get these guys back on. No, of course not. Just tightening up the rest of these front bracket bolts. Start pulling this compressor back to where it should be. this tensioner back to its home. You get out of my way. Oh, come on. Trying to feed this bolt through the bracket, through the tensioner, and then through a spacer behind the tensioner. It's just not being terribly cooperative. There's too many moving parts. There we go. And then before I tighten these up, I got to make sure that their threads are started. Oh yeah, we're up a bit. There we go. Yeah, so we've got so many bolts threading in at the same time. You want to make sure they're all starting to thread and straight before you start tightening anything down. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now. I had to remove 4 bolts from the bracket and then loosen 3 others. So I want to make sure that as these brackets are drawn together, none of the bolt holes are out of alignment. Might still be a little too far apart. Where are you? it off. That's going to be a 13. All right, we're good. I can go back and snug these bolts back up. Those are 13s. That's the big one. We can get our lines on now. When I cleaned up this compressor before I brought it over to the car, I did actually use a little of that excess refrigerant oil to lube the threads. Occasionally, I have the forethought or have the foresight to do something. You know, I don't do this stuff every day anymore. Tend to lose some of those little habits. Just like the other fittings too, you know, these are O-ring sealed, so they don't have to be super tight. This one should go. We're running into this bottle pretty hard. I might have to rotate this around. Oh, devil. Nothing's ever simple, is it? Thought I was going to be in trouble with the nuts running into the bracket back there, but I think I've got to spin this line. I think I'm going to have to spin this line to get it away, which means I've got to loosen the fitting on the other side, which is way up inside the fender and just at the most delightful place. The other end of this line has a straight fitting on it. So if I crack that line loose, I can rotate this whole hose and have the hose come out and go down a little bit. Right now it wants to duck into the bracket because I'm pushed back so much further, and this line used to be over here. So with it being so much closer to the coolant reservoir, it doesn't want to clear unless I put a big hump in it. Not even then, that line would be up here. I don't want that. So we'll go down in the fender and loosen up the other end of this line so we can rotate it. All will be well. Anything else I could do while I'm up here? Yeah, I guess I could throw the serpentine belt back on. 13? No. 14? Yes. So we're still on the power steering pulley and the alternator. Track on the water pump is good. All right, we're going to have to go AC compressor last by the look of it. I know this compressor is a little bit larger diameter, but I don't think I'll need to get a longer belt. I don't think it's that much of a difference overall. What am I off on here? Guy's blowing his horn at a flock of ibis that are on the side of the road, doing whatever ibis do, picking at the ground. This lady's gonna blow her horn like there's such an inconvenience to her. Some people, you know what I'm saying? Some people, as my brother says, that's the problem with the world today. There's too many goddamn people in it. I tend to agree. Alright, so we're going to try and slip water pump on last. Let's make sure the rest of the routing looks good. Trouble seeing the power steering pump from over here. Yeah, that's all. We're not hanging on anything. I might actually need a longer belt. Because I don't think I'm going to have enough swing out of this tensioner to allow it to go. Let's see. Nope. I'm just a hair short. Alright, well. Alright, so we got a 6PK 2515. We'll go to a 506 0990. We'll probably go to a 506 1000. Now, all things considered, not a big deal. Maybe even make a 1000, maybe a 1005. That sounds familiar. The belt we gotta get. What else we got up here? Oh yeah, we gotta swap. Put a terminal on the end of this power line. AC relay's right there. Morning.
Sir Michael?
Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks, partner.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Just opening up this protective sleeve they put over the wiring at the compressor end. It's forcing the wires to run over towards the ground they installed. It's like the sandhill cranes are out there getting feisty with somebody. I'm going to put this damn spade terminal sideways like this, and then when they tightened it down, it bent the crap out of it. There you go. Just bending it. Ground terminal straight so it follows the harness, and I have more than enough room to get on the relay. The relay's right here. The spade terminal is actually pointed that way, and when they ran that screw down, they actually had twisted the whole terminal up. Dumb. Get rid of that. Whenever possible, under hood or in the chassis, I always try and use crimp and seal connectors. If it's an ECM connection or something like that, something very sensitive, I'd solder it. But these crimp and seals will at least seal the moisture out. This is actually an old butane-powered soldering iron with a torch tip on it, and puts out more than enough heat to heat shrink. Obviously, it heats up super fast because it's a flame, and it's very controllable. Other than the fact that it is super hot, so you got to be careful you're not a little too overzealous with it and totally melt the connector out, melt the insulation out. Excuse me. Actually, I could shrink that up around there too a little bit. But let this guy cool off. It's getting a little warm. I'm going to shrink it up around the female spade. They manufacture these cheapos. I mean, they just cut off a piece of heat shrink tubing and slip it over the connector as they're pressing it, so it's got a big round circle around the female spade that I don't necessarily need. All right, we'll let that cool off. It's good and hot. So it seems our sandhill cranes are making a visit. So it would seem our sandhill cranes are coming by for a visit. Yelling out there a minute ago. A flock of ibis down the block too that I think they just chased off. Yeah, they're there. I'm here, you hungry little bastards, you. Man, sky is looking scary over there. Come on, come get some. Seemed like a good time to take a coffee break. Of course, if you know me at all, it's always a good time for a coffee break. And some of the ibis are going to come across to see what the fuss is about. I don't think they like deer corn, though. A friend of mine tipped me off to it. Apple flavored deer corn. Sandhill cranes go crazy for it. This one ibis spotted these guys eating. They're like, hey, something must be good over there. I'll tell you what, though, look at that sky. That is no bueno. I don't think it's coming at us, but a couple more ibis are starting to get the idea. They're funny, man. See if the sandhill cranes chase them off. I'm going to step back in the shadows here so I don't spook them. Ibis are real timid creatures. They all are. Somebody was feeding these sandhill cranes long before I got to this house, so let me tell you. Because the male in this three-piece group will come up and take corn out of your hand. And he did that second or third day I had seen him. I didn't even have anything at that point. He just came walking right up to me. So I don't scold myself too much for feeding the wildlife. And they certainly are surviving without me. They come by here 2 or 3 times a week for breakfast. The rest of the week, they're off doing their own thing. Maybe other people feed them too, I'm sure. Who knows? This is something I love. Oh, this is something I love by Florida, though. It's the wildlife. I lived out in Arizona, down in the Sonoran Desert. Phoenix Valley area for a long time. In the middle of that, I took 3 years and lived up in Flagstaff, and that was like a breath of fresh air in Flagstaff because you had elk and bear and fox and all kinds of stuff up there. Phoenix was just seemed so cooked, pardon the pun. It was just coyote and scorpions and birds, small birds, the occasional brown eagle, the occasional red-tailed hawk. But living in Florida here and the lake country, the marshland around, I mean, I get so much stuff through here. Lots of raccoons and possums. Sandhill cranes are like pigeons here in Deltona. Oh my God, there's thousands of them here. You can't go to the supermarket parking lot. They're filled with them. They're all over the place. But we get sandhill cranes and ibis and owls and red-tailed hawks and red-shouldered hawks and eagles, lots of bald eagles. Of course, gators. They don't bother you much. I've seen a few gators out kayaking with my daughter, but never seen anything out on the property. Had a couple of turtles come passing through. Well, I guess it's about time for me to get down on the ground and loosen that big connection down next to the receiver dryer so I can rotate this low side hose. The intermission is over for now. All right. And the low side line is loose down at the connection. And the fender wall down here. I should be able to twist this around. Actually, let me plug in the compressor relay first while I've got that line out of the way. Just make it easier for me anyway. My goodness. So tight. God, get in there. Bastard. Just so little room to squeeze my mitts in here. Come on, get on there. All right, that's on. Line's out of the way. Now this line I should be able to spin around. Not too much fuss. I'm not backing up into that low side fitting. Come on, get in there, you bastard. I'm gonna make sure I can still get my low side connector on the port. Now, I'll tell you, with this compressor mounted here, the fittings over here, my low side connector wants to back up right into where the high side line is going to be. I'm going to get a belt anyway. I might just get a new low side connector because I don't think this is going to work. I think if anything, I just need a straight low side with the service port on it. The bottom one's fine, but yeah. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get a new a 0 degree, 180 degree. This should be a 10 AN or a 10 HVAC line, 10 Freon line with the service port on it, with the low side service port. Because even on this angle, and I'll try and bring the camera over here to show you. And the problem I have here is this. wants to back up into the reservoir because this used to be out over here. I suppose I could pull the compressor back out and clock it, but I actually like these away from the ignition coil a little more as opposed to having it sit right on the coil wire, on the on the number 2 spark plug wire. So I'm actually happy with that. But what I'm going to do is get a straight fitting, so this return line will feed straight in and curve around, as opposed to having the 45 on it. And they're not expensive. I have my own crimper set, so it's not a big deal. And I guess that's a video for another day. Well, let me get some parts ordered up. I got to get a longer belt. I got to get that fitting, and we'll finish this up when the parts get here. All right, so new belt's in. In encountering the large diameter pulley on this compressor led me down a road that I hadn't traveled, and I'm going to break this down. Some things I hadn't considered, and some adaptations I'm going to make to make sure this compressor lives. It really comes down to pulley diameter and driven pulley diameter relative to drive pulley diameter, and how that relates to the driven pulley's RPM. So I was actually far outside the bounds of the original compressor's specified happy place. I'm going to break this down in a sec here. Hey, what's up, YouTube? I'm back. So a couple days have passed. Had to wait for some parts to come in. Got a serpentine belt on it. And I guess at a 1005 or a 25. What was on there? It was an Owen 990 on there. So I went with an inch and a half longer. And I'll go over the math on that in a minute, how I figured out how long of a belt I needed. Looks to be a good fit. We'll get it on the road. I haven't started it yet because the AC compressor is still disconnected. And I got to plumb in a new line. Got a new fitting, a new straight fitting, so I can redo that return line for the low pressure sides of the compressor. And we're going to do that today. We'll get it charged up and verify the belt isn't slipping, and probably get it out on the road and take a ride. I noticed last time when I was working on it, I reached underneath with a magnet to grab that bolt that fell down, and transpan was wet. Of course, it's always something. 43-year-old car, although the trans is out of a 04 with like 100,000 miles on it. I've been inside the transpan already, did a shift kit on it, but I didn't pull it. So, I dried it all off, and it looks to be it's probably come from inside the bell housing, so I'm going to guess either front seal or front pump, something like that. But it's all dried off. I'll get under there again, take a look, see if it's still dry. That was 3 days ago, and we'll see where it starts leaking from and diagnose it from there. I don't have a lift here, so I'm not pulling this trans out on the ground. I'm way too old for that crap. So if it's got a light leak, it's going to live with it for the time being until I get my new shop set up. I'm going to be looking to move in about 4 months, and I'm going to set up a decent shop with a lift and everything, and have some room to spread out and unpack some of the 10 pounds of crap in a 5-pound bag in the shop here. But let's get this compressor fitting installed, get the compressor reconnected, and I'll hook up the vacuum pump and we'll take it from there. All right, so here's our new fitting. This should be a size 10 straight fitting with service port. And this is an O-ring fitting. They give you an extra O-ring, which is nice. Add that to my collection. AC fittings aren't brain surgery. They're just like hydraulic fittings. AC runs at max, like 300 PSI. So it's not even as intense an application as a hydraulic fitting. But you can get these fitting crimper kits for cheap. I mean, I got this off Amazon. It's probably the second or third of these kits I've owned. And they come with an assortment of arbor sizes for crimping different diameter fittings. This is a 10. And AC fittings are pretty well standardized. AC hose is pretty well standardized. They range from like 4, dash 4 up to dash, I guess, 12. They're similar to AN fittings, but they're different sizes. This is a 10, which should be a 1/2-inch ID for a 1/2-inch ID hose, whereas a 10 on an AN would be 5/8. In AN fittings, in case you don't know, the dash number, dash 4, dash 6, dash 8, relates to 1/16 of an inch. So a dash 8 is 8/16 or 1/2-inch. So it's air conditioning line is similar, but it's a different measurement. And not that it matters. As long as you know what size hose it is, you're good. And this is for a standard barrier hose. In later years, they came out with reduced barrier hose, which has a thinner sidewall. And they take special reduced barrier fittings, which are a smaller diameter. You'll see the arbors on some of these, like, you can get that. See, that's a 12. So that's standard barrier 12. If you go to a different size, that's a 6 SRB, a reduced barrier. So it's a 6, but it's only a 6 with a reduced barrier. So it's got a wider, it takes up more slack. So we're going to be looking for a 10. I don't know what size is in here. I don't know what size is in here already. Get out. Yeah, this is an 8. That's a 10. Oh, I see they got them set up all the SRBs on one side. Let's just pop in. You gotta collapse the ears and it'll fit in, and then the side ears go in there. It's just really held by the rubber. That colored rubber is what holds it. So go over to the car here. Here was my problem, is I need to come straight into the back of the compressor, and I've got some wiggle room in this hose, a little bit of slack, so I don't need to take a whole lot. I don't need to take a whole lot. Oh, for fuck's sake, man. All right, so here we are back at the car. And if you recall, I had to go straight into the back of this compressor. I wanted this line to curve around the coolant reservoir, and I should have more than enough room here. Notice I did plug this line and plug the orifice and plug the connector on the back of the compressor. You don't want to leave a system open for any length of time. Ooh, I make that sucker tight. Because it will attract moisture. You know, in the receiver dryer, the function of the dryer is to remove moisture out of an AC system, so it has a desiccant in there. And then, of course, is hydroscopic. It attracts moisture. So if you leave the system open, that desiccant will get congested with moisture, and you'll end up moisture in your system, and you'll end up with no working. I'm going to pull my plugs out here. And let's see where this guy's got to go. I get a pretty good deal. You can see how big the connector is. I mean, it's more than enough fitting length. I don't need to take anything serious off this hose. So I'm going to want to take this off about, I don't know, maybe a ½ inch past the existing ferrule. And most of these kits come with this nice little guillotine cutter. These work great. I've got a couple of these guys now. And that's pretty much junk. I mean, the only thing you could say salvage off it really would be the O-ring. I'm not going to bother. O-rings are cheap. Trash. Once they're cut off, you can't reuse them, so just get rid of it. And then we're going to set this one up so I can get the right orientation. I want to make sure this is rotated correctly. It's fully seated. I'm going to double check if it's seated by just making a mark with my finger, and you can see I'm all the way seated up in the top of the connector, the top of the crimp fitting. I roll that sideways or straight up. I feel like for getting the AC gauge hoses in and out easily enough, or easier, I probably should roll it sideways. That's fine. So we've got orientation on the hose good, set where we want. Now this can be a bit of a juggling act. This is a release. Basically, it's a little hydraulic ram, and you'll see it pushing the arbor closed. I'm going to wrap this guy around and put the lock pin in. And as you can see, I'm about an eighth of an inch shy of the top of the crimp connector. And you start squeezing it. Get it to grab. And you can one-hand this most of the way until that connector starts to grab the hose really well and you're not worried about rotating it, because what I don't want to do is twist this connector on the end of the hose. So I'm being careful with it. And ultimately, this is a lot easier on the bench than in the car, but you know, you gotta do what you gotta do. And then just crimp the hell out of it. The ram will run out of stroke and you'll feel it. And that's it. Loosen up the release, pull the pin, and look at that, textbook perfect crimp. Put my kit away. And that's that. Grab a wrench to tighten that up. I think that was 1 1/8 maybe. Let's see. I think it's actually 1 1/16, but 1 1/8 will do it. And that's it. Doesn't have to be super tight. Doesn't have to be super tight. You just want it snug enough that it's not going to back out and take pressure off that O-ring. Where'd my gauges go? Nice. And maybe you can see what I mean. With the hose pointed up or towards the back of the car, it's a lot easier than dealing with the hose running out the side. And we'll hook up the vacuum pump. Got a good seal in there. You always got to check these seals. These seals have a habit of popping out of there and getting lost. And we got plenty of oil in the compressor. I'm gonna plug this in. It's going to get noisy. We'll see what the see if the gauges do. If we can pull a vacuum on it, which we should. It may take a second, but it'll pull it. Wouldn't you know, of course, I'm like a foot too short on the cord. Grab an extension. All right, gonna go loud. Well, not too loud. Let's see here. You can see it's pulling down a nice vacuum really, really quick already. Down to almost 30. You want to suck down an AC system to 30 inches of vacuum for no less than 30 minutes. And what that'll do is it's going to help perk any air out of the oil. Because the oil, can get foam and air can get encapsulated in the oil, and it's going to sit in there. But you suck it down to a vacuum, and it'll boil the air out of the oil. Any air left in the system, obviously air is compressible, is going to take away from the cooling ability. So you want to get all the air out of it you can. So yeah, so we're going to 30 inches of vacuum for 30 minutes minimum. And then we can shut it down and make sure it maintains that vacuum. It should maintain it indefinitely, but I don't know. I'd give it a half an hour, maybe another half an hour, and see whether it's still holding whatever the vacuum was when you shut it down. And so it pulled down to 30 inches quickly. That's nice. I don't think this vacuum pump will pull much lower than that. And we'll just let this guy sit and run for a half an hour. And I'll check back in a few minutes. Well, while I'm waiting for this thing to suck down for half an hour, I cleaned up a little bit, and looks like my cranes are here for breakfast. Good morning, guys. All right, so I'm back. It's been about 35 minutes now. I'm going to go ahead and close the valves. Turn off the compressor for the vacuum pump. And so far, it seems to be holding vacuum nicely. We'll let that sit for a little bit. How long is up to you? You can let it sit overnight. I don't care. It may drop just a hair, but I wouldn't expect much. You might have a little bit of leakage through the valves. If it's got a significant leak in the system, you'll know it. I'm going to let this sit for at least 15 minutes, make sure we don't have a significant drop in vacuum, and then we'll charge it up. As Murphy Diesel would say, stand by. All right, so I think we're good. We've been sitting about 20 minutes now. We had no drop in vacuum. I've got my 134 canister open and connected to the feed line. Something you want to keep in mind is this yellow line right now has been disconnected. Obviously, it was under vacuum while the vacuum pump was on, but there's no valve at the opposite end of it at the vacuum pump end. So when you disconnect it, you lose the vacuum in this line, and it's essentially filled with air. So I'm going to purge this out. So I've got the valve on the tank open and the line connected, and if I crack this up here, I should be able to purge the air out. And I'll open this until I get some Freon out. Oh yeah, this has a valve under it. Right on the camera. If you can hear it, there we go. We got some Freon now. It was just warm air coming out, and now we've got cold and a little bit of cloudiness. And then what we're going to do is right now we're looking at ambient temp of 77, 78 degrees, which is about where we were when we started. So I'm going to fill this back up to the same resting point that we started out, which was about 78 psi. And Freon typically does that. It'll your point not under compression of normal charge will usually be about the same as ambient temp, plus or minus a couple of psi, and that'll get us in the ballpark. Once we get it up to 78 psi just sitting, then we can look and we can close these valves back up and start it up and see what the compressor's building to and sucking down on the low side. I did go back and turn the compressor about a dozen times with a ratchet just to spin it like we talked about before to make sure the old oil's purged out. We don't have any kind of hydrolock situation from adding all the 6 or 8 ounces of oil to it. It spins nice and free. It actually spins quite a bit easier than the 508 I took out of there. So that 508 may be starting to lock up inside as well. That was really stiff to turn, but this new 7 series is a lot smoother. So I'm going to open a low side, let some Freon in here, and you can see it passing through the sight glass too. We're going to take this in little shots. This tank should be well over 100 psi, I would think. So I don't think it'll be I don't think it'll be a problem to get a decent base charge, a decent resting charge in there. 75 on the low side and climbing on the high side. Let's see where it's at. And you could open both, but it's going to work its way around anyway. I'm not worried about it. As you can see, it'll take it in anyway. The little disposable cans are a different story. They typically run a lower pressure, so you need to feed in through the low side with it running. That way the low side creates a vacuum and sucks it out of the can. But this is a regular, 30-pound R134 tank. Which shout out to my buddy Steve, who was kind enough to give it to me. Where are we at now? 72? Looks good to me. Let's say we start this girl up and see what it does. If you don't have an electric fan that automatically comes on with the AC compressor, you're going to want to make sure you have good fan flow, good airflow across the condenser, because if that condenser overheats, it's going to send your high side pressure way high. So I've got electric fans that come on as soon as the AC comes on, so I'm not overly concerned about that. And it looks like we're sitting at about 75 psi. So, moment of truth, let's start it up, see what happens. So, as you can hear, as soon as the car started up, my microphone went to crap, it was clipping out. So I'm going to overdub a section here. It's only a couple of minutes long. So we're just run around and turn the car on. You can see the AC kick on. And what we're doing is we're watching the low side and high side points and see how far it goes in either direction. Now we can tell automatically if the compressor is coming on every time that low side starts to dip. And what's going to happen is it'll pull it down low enough that it trips the low side shut-off switch. And it'll pop back off again. So I'm going to add a little bit more Freon here, because obviously it's a little too low. It's sucking it down way too low. Now the high side's climbing up, and ideally we want to see it be about 200 or so. Now I've got electric fans that are programmed to come on once the high side reaches a certain pressure, but there's a bit of a delay in that fan turning on, and there are some shutdown timers that happen. So once it shuts off, it has to wait 10 seconds to turn back on again. So here you'll see the high side starting to climb way above 10. It's because the cooling fan isn't on yet. So I don't have any airflow across the condenser. When you're doing this, you need to make sure you have a fan. If you don't have electric fans and they're running, make sure you have a nice fan blowing air in through the grill. Your regular cooling fan is working. You should be up to operating temperature if you have a clutch fan. That way it's pulling full duty. So we're going to watch it and we'll let it settle a little bit, let it stabilize. It's got to distribute this Freon around throughout the system, and we'll find a bit of a balance. And you can see the compressor cycling on and off. Every time it cycles on, that low side starts to drop. And when it cycles off, the low side starts to climb back up again. And that's your major indicator. You don't even need to be looking at the car. You can just look at the gauges and tell whether the compressor's on or not. If that low side needle is falling or low, then the compressor's on and it's sucking down the low side. So you can see it cycling on. We're going to give it a minute to settle a little bit. Well, it's dipping pretty good now, and that high side's flying because the fans aren't on. Then the fan will kick on. And you'll see what will start to happen is that low side will still be low, and the high side will start dropping because the fan, there it is right there. The fan just turned on, the low side's falling. So we're starting to get stabilized. Let this cycle a few more times. I may come back and add a little bit more Freon in because we're still cycling off that low side switch pretty regularly. So we're obviously still undercharged. There we go. So we'll add some more Freon in there. Let it come up. Now I don't have a scale or an AC charging station, so I can't add Freon by weight. So I've got to do it the old-fashioned way, which is watching the gauges. So we'll let it cycle a little bit. You always want to give it time to catch up and stabilize. You don't want to keep pumping Freon in there or you'll overcharge you before you know it. There's the high side starting to fly again, and the fan will kick on. There it goes. And the fan kicked on just before it tripped the low side switch. So we're still undercharged. Let it stabilize a little bit. Low side still getting sucked down below, going down to like 15 or 20, which obviously is way too cool. And that's going to relate to the temperature at the evaporator. If you keep running that evaporator at 15, 20 degrees, no matter how hot it is out, you're going to start freezing the water that's accumulating. I don't say accumulator, but you're going to start freezing that water that starts condensing on the evaporator coil, and you'll frost the evaporator up, and it'll restrict the airflow through it, and you won't have cold air. So we're still getting down below 25, down to 20 or so. I don't want to go any lower than 25 or 30. And the end result, so we'll see. We'll cycle a little bit. See, the high side's not getting up anywhere near 200 because that fan's pretty steady right now. Fans are running. We're going to add a little more Freon, I think, because we're still dropping down. Let's see. That's about 30, we're at 25. Still falling pretty good, down to 20 and it trips. We'll add a little more Freon back in, see if we can get that to stabilize at 25 or 30. Ultimately, I mean, as far as the guide goes, and you can look up these charts like this one all over the internet, and typically you want between 40 and 50 on the low and 175 to 210 for this particular ambient temperature. That's where knowing what your ambient temperature is important. So I usually shoot for the lower side of that, 35 to 40. The end of any of these operations is going to be road testing. So if I get out on the road and it's frosting the evaporator or it's cycling the AC too much at driving RPM, then I'll come back and I'll add a little more Freon in there. See if you can keep it above that low pressure threshold. Because a low pressure switch is designed to shut the system off if the pressure drops too low. So if you have a leak and you run out of Freon, it doesn't burn the compressor up, and you're less likely to frost the evaporator. So ideally, when you're cruising down the road at 1500 RPM, you want it to be able to run steady at 30, 35, 40 psi, enough that it doesn't trip the low pressure switch, but you've also got really good cooling. Now, of course, if you overcharge it, then you may run at 50, 60 psi on the low side, which that low side pressure relates to your evaporator temperature. So if you're at 50, 60 psi, and you're blowing 50 or 60 degrees out of that evaporator, combined with under-dash temperature and everything else, your net vent temperature is probably going to be 65, 70, which isn't going to feel cold at all. So, and of course, the high side is going to be way high. Then you increase the chance of getting a leak someplace or nuking the compressor and that. So you want to shoot for that. I shoot for that 35-40 on the low side, and I want to see no higher than maybe 210 on the high side. The fan shut off again. Fan just came on. See the high side falling. That airflow through the condenser is really important. You can't understate that. You can't overstate that. Now we're looking at about 25, 24 psi on the low side and like 190 on the high side. So we'll add a little more. I want to see that high side somewhere around 200. Yeah, it's funny. You can hear me say that through the clipped audio on the other one. Back down, we're at 25, 26, and as it stabilizes, it runs for a minute, that'll settle a little bit. We're right at about 25 on the nose. It's probably a little low. I always rather have a little headroom to add a little more than have to go back in and take some out. Just wasting it. We're just under 200 on the high side, and we're at about 25, 26 on the low side. Just under 200. That's a good place right now. Now, I think I'm going to shut this off here and let it stabilize and see what our net base charge is. And then I'm going to come back into it and start it up again. And bring the RPM up a little bit and see whether it wants to trip that, if it sucks down that low side enough to trip the low pressure switch again. Now we're going to add a little bit more, add a scooch. Give us a little bit of headroom. See if we can get that high side up around 205. And we're at about 25, still 25, 26 on the low side. And we're pretty cold out right too. You're driving right now. So if you're driving around a 90, 100 degree day, your pressure readings are going to be higher. I think that's a good place for right now. I got 45 degrees at the dash vent. That is frosty. So I'm going to shut this off and let it stabilize and see what our net pressure is, and we'll go from there. All right, I don't know if you can see that. But we're at about 45 degrees at the dash vents, which is beautiful. We'll see what our pressure balances out to. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect it from the tank. Yeah, you may laugh at me purging the air out of this fill line, this yellow hose going to the tank, but you shut the valve off on the tank and disconnect the hose, and there's no joke how much air or freon comes back out of that hose. It holds quite a bit. So it's definitely a good idea to purge the plain air out of that and pressurize it with freon from the tank before you open these valves up and allow the vacuum to suck all that plain air in. It looks to me like it's settling in at about 50, which is odd. Except that now that we got AC lines and an evaporator that are freezing cold. Oh yeah. I'll tell you what, 45, 46 degrees at the dash vents, and that's the one all the way by the driver's side door. So that's going to be probably the warmest vent because it's the furthest from the evaporator. And man, that sucker is blowing ice chips. That's a beautiful thing. My only concern is if it runs too cold, then I could conceivably frost the evaporator up, but we'll take that as it comes. As warm as the weather is here in Florida, I don't see it being much of a concern. I'd rather run a little low on pressure than a little high. But no belt slippage. Compressor turns on and off. Cycle's nice and quiet. It's obviously got less drag than the SD508 that was on there, because you can hear the RPM bump before it comes on. You know, the ECM is supposed to do that. In anticipation of the load of the compressor, it bumps the idle up a little bit. I may go into the tune and knock a little off of that bump up. The extra air it gives the engine. We're still looking at like 55. It's odd. I was expecting it to come right back up to 75 or so, or higher, because it was at 75 when we started, and then I added more Freon, so I was thinking it'd be up to 85, 90, but we'll let this car come back up to room temperature and see what it does. See what it do. All right, so I'm back. So as you can see, the pressure's come up, just sitting here warming up. I think that evaporator was just so cold that it was shrinking it. It was, you know, the Freon itself was so cold overall that it was bringing the pressure down. Now we're up to about, we're almost at 70 now, which is kind of where I expected it to be. One thing I wanted to double check, you know, according to the reference charts, you should see it's about 80 degrees in here right now. We should see about 40 to 50 on the low side and 175 to 210 on the high side. And obviously I'm a little below 200 last time I looked, but like I said, I'd rather be a little low than a little high. But you don't want to be so low that you're tripping the low side when you're driving, because as the RPM comes up, you know, you're cruising at 1600 RPM. You don't want the compressor constantly cycling on and off, so that would definitely be a sign that it's too low. So now that I know the pressure stabilizes, no leaks, anything like that, I'm going to start it back up again and run it, and let the pressure stabilize, and goose the throttle a couple times, bring the RPM up, and see if I start tripping the low side. And if I do, then I'm going to add a little more Freon to it to keep it out of cycling. All right, so one more time here. This clip's a bit shorter than the first one with the overdub, so it'll let it run, bring it up, and give the RPM a goose and see what happens. I'm gonna bet it'll cut out as the RPM comes up. As the RPM of the compressor increases, it'll suck down the low side. Yep. Hang in, and there it goes. Compressor just turned off. Let the pressures come up and stabilize, and it'll re-engage the compressor. There it goes. Pressure's looking good. Fan's on because the temperature's up. Oh, or is it? It just cycled off again. Now keep in mind, we're giving it RPM, but we're not moving down the road, so the airflow across the condenser is not increasing. So under RPM, that high side's going to want to creep up a little bit. I mean, the fans are running, but you know. So I think we're going to give it a little more Freon here. We want to keep it from dipping the low side low enough under throttle that it automatically disengages the AC, because obviously we want AC when we're driving down the highway. And we'll give it a little shot here. I hooked up the air tank, and I just got to purge out this fill line again. That's probably what I'm babbling about right now. Here we go. See a nice cloud of Freon. And we'll give it a little shot. Give her a little goose. You see, the low side's still running about 25 psi, which you know is too low, especially under throttle. It's going to suck all the way down. See if we can get that high side to settle in at about 205 to a 210. See what the low side looks like. Yeah, 27. Falling a little bit. Still pretty low. Give it some more. Come on, Mike, today. Here we go. Yeah, we'll see the high sides climbing up about 205. I'll probably give it some more throttle and see what it does. See if we get low enough to shut it right off. You see, as the compressor RPM comes up, it sucks it right down, shuts it off again. So, all right, we're going to need to get some more Freon in there. Oh, there we go. You know, you're moving Freon in a big loop from the high side around to the low side, so it's not uncommon. You're adding Freon in, it's going to blow it into the high side. It takes a minute to get through the orifice and start to balance out and bring the low side up a little bit. So I'm a big fan of patience when doing this. So let this thing sit and perk a little bit. So ultimately, we need to get this thing down the road and see what it does. If it turns out the compressor's cycling while I'm cruising down the street or cruising down the highway and it's cycling on and off, then I'm going to need to come back and add a little more in. That's just par for the course. Oh, I'll tell you what, that air conditioning is frosty, man. This is going to be so nice. Without a doubt, works way better than the 508 ever did. Get this tank disconnected. I'm sure these guys are good in here. And as the ambient temperature goes up, you know, in the summertime, it's going to run a little bit higher pressure. So that's fine. Right now, it's kind of coolish. Coolish. Yeah. So I'm going to call that golden, folks. We got 210 on the high side, sitting still. With just the fans going, no natural airflow coming through the radiator or through the condenser rather. And we're getting down to like 25 on the low side, but it's not low enough to trip the low side switch under acceleration. So I'm going to call that done. All right, so here's what happened with the pulleys. I came to realize that the pulley diameter on the 7H15 was larger than the 508. It's 5.2 inch diameter as opposed to 4.69 or 4.7, about a half-inch difference. So I had to get a longer belt. Not a big deal. Now I could just order a bunch of belts and keep trying them until they fit, or I can just do some quick math. Pulley diameter in the 508 is 469, which makes the circumference 14.71 inch. Diameter on the 7H15 is 5.2, which makes the circumference 16.32. So if we subtract, we got a difference of 1.6 inches. Now, the belt doesn't wrap all the way around the pulley. It only covers about 70% of it. So our difference really is 1.13 inch. Now, since the belt I took off there was actually real tight, I didn't mind going a little bit longer, so I went with 1.5 inches longer. So since the original belt was a 5060990, I went with a 5061005. In case you don't know, those last four digits relate to the length of the belt. The 50 is a belt type, the 6 is rib count, and 990 means 99 inches and 0 halves, whereas 1005 means 100 inches and a half. So, all right, I figured out what belt's going to fit. That's fine. But this led me down a different road, because in realizing that the compressor pulleys were different diameter, it had me thinking about the relationship to crank pulley. The crank pulley on this motor is 7 3/4 inches. Both of these AC compressor diameters are smaller, which means they're going to spin at a higher RPM relative to the crank pulley. Now, if we look at it, the SD508 is going to spin at 1.65 to 1, so it's going to turn 1.6 times every time the crank turns once. The 7H15 is at 1.49. So what does that do to compressor RPM? Well, both of these compressors are rated for continuous duty at 6,000 RPM with spikes or downshift speeds up to 7,000 or 8,000 RPM. But they shouldn't exceed 6,000 under continuous duty. So based on the ratios, I need to go into the tune and make sure the ECM is disengaging the compressor clutch above 3,700 RPM for a 508 or 4,000 for the 7H15. These can take a spike above that for a short period of time, but that really is about where I should be. And honestly, if I'm over 4,000 RPM, then I'm having fun with the car and I can deal without AC for a few minutes. Or at least until I back off the throttle and it re-engages the AC clutch, because that's part of the tune as well, is when it'll re-enable after the RPM drops down under your set point. Thanks for tuning in today. You see me, is it too bright behind me? Thanks for tuning in, I appreciate it. This is Mike Gabriel from Viking Motorworks with another installment of the C3 Corvette junk, whatever other stuff I'm working on. What do I got left? Oh, going to be doing a BTR rocker trunnion upgrade kit soon. That's the V2. So that's roller bearing, captive roller bearings. These are the factory rockers on this motor, so I want to upgrade those because I'm regularly spinning this to 6,400 RPM. And on stock rockers, that's a little scary. I don't know how bad. I want to pull apart since I built the motor. When I put them in, originally there wasn't much playing them. They felt pretty good, but we pull it apart now and see how sloppy they are. And I'm going to do this upgrade just to be on the safe side. It's not expensive. And only takes a couple hours to pull the rockers off and retrofit the trunnion bearings. But thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. Hey, like and subscribe, man. Like 90% of my viewers don't subscribe. You don't know when new stuff's coming out. I've got like Happy Dog shorts coming out. I got kayaking stuff. I've got lots of mechanical stuff. I mean, I've been doing this my whole life. I can't stop. So there's always something coming in the garage, either the C3 Vet or the next project car or bikes or truck stuff. So, subscribe, hit that like button, and I'll see you next time. Bye.